Who should I believe? This teaching comes from Hebrews chapter 5, 11 through 14. The writer of Hebrews says this: about this we have much to say, and it is hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. You need milk, not solid food. For everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, since he is a child. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. Have you ever been swindled by someone or deceived by someone? I remember this time when I was in the military. I was taken advantage by a man. I was taking a bus home, and I was waiting on a bus home, and I didn't have much money. I was in the military, and a guy came up and gave me this story and said, hey, he just needed some water or something like that, and asked if I had any money. I just had a $20 bill. I gave it to him, and he said he'd bring back the change, and he never came back. He even gave me a coat of his, quote unquote coat of his, which I found out he had taken from someone else previous to that. I mean, I felt really bad. I had been swindled of my last $20 as a military guy. I had an empty stomach and no cash, and this guy had all the cash and a full stomach. I mean, but there's something worse than losing $20, right, to a con man. Indiscriminately eating poisonous doctrines can make you sick spiritually, and those can have lasting consequences. Charles Hayden Spurgeon says this. This is really, really good. Listen to this quote. He says this: discernment is not knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's knowing the difference between right and almost right. That's so true. We've lost this necessary truth in our culture, the skill of discernment in things like politics, entertainment, culture engagement. We are more savvy in those things than we are savvy in the Word of God and prayer, and the results are evident. It's really killing the church. The writer of Hebrews wants us to know that you don't want to weakly follow Jesus. It's not like I got saved and that's enough, and I just know a couple Bible stories and that's enough. He wants you to go from milk, from simple things, to meat, to much hardier things that take some time to work through. He warns that living on milk instead of meat is very, very harmful for you. We need to be able to discern, which is knowing the difference between good and evil. And there's no goodness in not knowing, in naivete or in ignorance. Actually, the Proverbs paints the naive person is a very, very destructive person. And we're called to avoid naive people, not to be a naive person. So what I'm calling for us as believers, is what I'd like to call a discerning engagement of the world. So how can I grow in discerning engagement? Well, here's a couple of suggestions. First of all, it goes back to the Word of God. I know you probably think, oh, every teaching, every sermon is like, read your Bible and pray. He's like, isn't there something more? It's like, well, we don't even read our Bibles and pray. So let's get that going. Let's do that in our lives, and we will become more discerning. I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's a good broken record. You need to hear from God, and you need to pray to God to connect with God. Those are like vital lifelines. And just because it's the same thing over and over again, you don't, detach yourself from your lifeline. Second, you need to get into community to talk about struggles, to talk through things. In this isolation, the COVID isolation, it's been really tough to be in community. Thankfully, God has brought some great people to me through community via Zoom, and I've really gotten to wrestle through some doctrines and things like that. And I found that it's really helped me grow in my knowledge. Third, you need to engage the world around you by asking this question. I want you to write this question down. What is this teaching me about God? When you watch a movie, ask yourself, what is this trying to say to me about God? And you're like, well, I don't know. Marvel movies don't talk about God. Oh, but they are always saying something about the universe around them. and about God, whether you know it or not. A great example is, Thor. Thor, I don't know if you're into Marvel movies, but Thor is one of the major Avengers. Thor's storyline is all about struggling with pride and the destructiveness of pride and how it can destroy even a mighty person on the outside. That's saying a lot. God says a lot about pride, right? And so movies are often a reflection of the truth of the word of God. There can be good things like a sunset that bring joy to your heart, or evil things like the senseless murder of a college female. We should be able to discern the difference between the good and the bad by asking this question: what is this teaching me? What is this teaching me about God when I read my textbooks? What is this teaching me about God when I read just a novel? What is this teaching me about God when I listen to this person speak? What is this teaching me about God? Everything in this world is teaching us about God. Beloved, we need to become discerning in this day and age. We need to hear God's voice. We need to ask ourselves what this is teaching us about God, because the results are eternal. Love you. You are loved. See you next week.